Welcome to the Homeschool Lounge. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Melodie de Jager, founder of the BabyGym and Mind Moves Institute, based in Johannesburg, in our very own Homeschool Lounge. Melodie is a developmental specialist and published author of numerous books for parents and teachers on neurodevelopment, translated into English, Spanish, Chinese, Russian, and Italian. Melodie is actively involved in research and treatment of developmental disorders of babies and children with a team of 120 instructors in South Africa, Namibia, and Spain. Welcome, Melodie. For this first interview, we are focusing on reading readiness and Melodie's revolutionary new reading readiness program. Melodie, you have been involved in research for decades. Please share with us how this passion started.
It actually started with my dad, because when I was young, he asked me if I wanted to drive a car one day, and I said yes, and he said, well, then best you know how to do it. So at the age of 9, my dad taught me the fundamentals of the mechanics of a car. And I think it's the time spent with my dad, but it was also, maybe it's a bit of a genetic thing that I inherited from him, but that shaped my mind in terms of how does it work. So that set the stage for constant research in finding ways to enhance learning. Because learning and a child's self-esteem, not just a child and adults as well, is so closely intertwined. To me, it was very important to figure out, why do some children learn with so much ease? And then most specifically, why do others battle? And even more importantly, what can we do about it? Because I really believe every child has the ability to learn, not always the way the school wants to teach, and it doesn't matter which kind of school, but somehow a child needs to develop in a way that that child will be fully functional in the greater community as well. And for that reason, I needed to understand, how does, school learning, reading and writing, that kind of stuff, math. It was very important for me to understand what needs to happen in the brain and the body, that obviously the whole child, but to enable them to learn. And that's where the research came in. I was born with a passion for learning.
That passion shines through. It's been such a privilege. I was part of the BabyGym Institute for 13 years, and it's been such a privilege, and you've taught me so much. And for that, I think nobody can ever take that away, and thank you. So many children, Melodie, battle to learn to read. What are some of the challenges that children face, and what can parents do to assist their children?
The thing is, many children battle with reading because they play, lots of multisensory play, lots of movement, interacting with real things, and all of a sudden they need to conquer the symbols, somebody else's symbols, because the alphabet is somebody else's symbols. So one of the problems is there's very little transition for most children between multisensory, whole body, whole child learning, interaction, the way children should learn, and then that transition to sit down and interact with somebody else's symbols. And I specifically call it somebody else's symbols, because when we do creative art with children, whether that's in the sandpit, whether that is on paper, but when these children do creative art, what they are actually learning to do, they're transitioning, because it's multisensory experience, but simultaneously, whatever they've experienced or whatever you've discussed, whatever language, whatever theme you've just discussed, the moment they need to create a picture of that, they need to think, they need to translate that into marks, symbols, because what's on that paper is not the real thing, it's a symbol of it, but it's their marks. And that's why young children, when they've created a picture, they love reading it to you. So creative art is the start of writing my own symbols. Then they start reading their own symbols. And then around about the age of between 6 and 7, but closer to 7, the eye becomes neurophysiologically ready to learn somebody else's symbols. And the age is very, very important, because any optometrist will tell you, it takes the eye 9 months in utero and nearly 7 years, but it's 6 and a bit, years after birth to become ready to focus on a flat surface and near point vision. So there's a transition. So one of the things that's so incredibly important is for parents is to encourage children to give them a blank page. A blank page is intimidating. The moment you give them a worksheet or you give them an activity book, it's wonderful, it's wonderful. But who did the thinking? The person who created those pages. Because the one with a blank page is the one that needs to learn to think. And for that reason, parents need to encourage their children to translate their multisensory experiences, the themes, things that they think, a song, how to translate that into a picture, because that's the start of writing and reading. And you'll hear, Marinda, I constantly say writing and reading, but we'll get there.
Thank you, Melodie. That's very enlightening. Parents are told to focus on playful learning in the early years. How do they prepare their children for the more abstract concept of reading without falling into that paper-driven task trap? Well, I think actually you've answered that in many ways, but I don't know if you'd maybe like to add.
Yeah. But let me just backtrack quickly, because it's a marvelous question. It's a very pertinent question, and you're the first person to ever ask me that question specifically. So thank you, Marinda. It's a very important question. And as I explained, the moment you take your experiences and your thoughts, your feelings, and you can somehow act it out, that can be in fantasy play. That's where play therapy comes in as well. That's where sand play comes in. You can act it out. You know, I'm a granny, obviously, and I'm constantly amazed when I watch my grandchildren, and I've got 7 under the age of 7. And when I watch them play, I can clearly see who they play. And I don't necessarily like to see myself through their eyes, because they catch on your mannerisms. It's important because they're translating experiences into verbal expression, full body and verbal. In other words, they talk about things. They show us with their body and they talk about it. You must always remember verbal language. 2 facets of it. You need to be able to listen, understand, and speak a language long before you can write and read a language with great ease.
Today, we're focusing specifically on your revolutionary reading readiness program. What sets your program apart from other reading programs?
It's not a reading program. So it's not better than anything else. It's not a reading program. It's a reading readiness program. I think we forget that reading isn't natural. I think we forget that it's an acquired skill. Eating is natural. Walking is natural. Talking is natural. Reading is not natural. Drawing is natural. Because it's that old thing, the alphabet is somebody else's marks. Okay, so the reading readiness program is it is fun. I've really during lockdown, I thought of all the grade R's that missed out on a decent grade R in 2020 and also in 2021. I thought of the grade 1s in 20 and 21 and 22 and maybe even in 23, because it has an echo effect that has missed out on those day-to-day building of the skills, the one after the other. So I thought during lockdown, I thought, how can I assist? Because I was locked down at home and I had time. And I thought, how can we assist parents? Because teachers are incredibly important. But at the end of the day, the parent is the person who spends more time with their own child. The parent is the person that has a vested interest. This is my child. You know, it's not a bunch of other people's children, it's my child. And with that, I'm not taking anything away from a dedicated teacher. But there is something different when a parent works with their own child. There's some difficulties as well. But it is incredibly important that parents know. They spend more time with their children than teachers, I hope. So, and especially in the homeschooling environment, for which I applaud you, because you are dedicating your life to your child's education. It's commendable. It's commendable. You're taking the responsibility for your child's learning. But most parents who I understand become homeschooling parents when trained as teachers. And so I thought, let me write something that is very structured, that whether you're a teacher or you're not a teacher, whether you're an accountant or a CEO or a whatever, an artist, that you will, success must be guaranteed, because success breeds success. So I developed the program in such a way that if you follow the steps, a grade R child will be able to transition to learn to read in grade 1. I do not teach them to read in grade R. I don't think it's appropriate. They need to be read to. They need to sit close to somebody and share that amazing experience when we page through a book. What's next? With my grandchildren, we have this habit that at the end of each page, I'll say, ding, because they can't read yet. And then they know they need to page, because those are the habits of reading that we have to establish very firmly, of which a love of reading is fundamentally important before a child will ever be ready to learn to read.
I had the privilege to look at your reading readiness program. Learning the alphabet and its sounds can be a very daunting task for little ones. However, when children begin with me, which lesson 1 does, they start from a point that's known themselves. Then you introduce Listen Land, which is part of your lessons, and this becomes a destination for children. Why is it important to start with me?
Who's the most important person in the whole wide world? Me. Not me, Melodie, but I'm talking about a grade R, grade 1 learner. Who's the most important person in the whole wide world? Themselves. So that's on the one hand. But research with a lot of research, international research, has shown, and specifically in collaboration with Russian neurologists, I've come to understand the incredible importance of current location. So for a moment, just think of a GPS. Without current location, you can't reach your destination. And as Marinda quite beautifully said, our destination is Listen Land, because listening is incredibly important before a child can read. You see, we think reading is predominantly visual. It's not. Blind people can read. Why? Because they can feel. So their input is through touch. Whereas a sighted person, when we can see, our input is through looking. But whether you're blind or not, ultimately, what you touch or what you see is converted into sound. And I think most parents will agree, children don't listen. Definitely not the first time. So the destination is Listen Land. But to go back to the GPS, so we want preschool children to really listen extremely well, and they need to know their bodies exceptionally well. So current location, my body, destination, listening, okay? And in between, the moment there's a current location, you can get the route, the steps will emerge. And it's the same with learning. So the moment a child has a very strong, you must remember, I talk about a child, but because my area of speciality is understanding the brain and the relationship between the brain as the organ of behavior. Isn't this beautiful? I just read it in an article over the weekend. The brain is the organ of behavior. So your child's behavior is generated in the brain. Yes, it's executed through muscles, but it starts with the senses that feeds information to the brain. The brain then processes information, and then they output through behavior. So the child is not the behavior. See, lots of times we see strange behavior. It's not the child. It's just the output. So if you want to enable a child to transition from playful multisensory learning to reading in grade 1, the lessons in the reading readiness program is developed in such a way that it always starts with the child. As a matter of fact, we teach them this rhyme. I'm important. All the letters in the whole wide world starts on me. So here 2 things. Not only must the child have current location, what have I got? Body awareness. Where am I in my environment? Am I upstairs? Am I downstairs? Am I on grass? Am I on tiles? Am I inside? Am I outside? Am I between the table and the chair? Where am I? Current location is incredibly important. And then here comes the wonderful thing. Now we teach the child that every letter of the alphabet starts on them. So the child's body becomes the current location for each letter of the alphabet. Because you may have noticed that when children start writing, whether it's an H, a E, a L, or a P, they tend to write them all as though they're exactly the same size. Well, it's not like that. So we know they need to get that, because if they don't have an understanding of the symbols, they can't start reading with those things. So in this reading readiness program, we teach them every letter of the alphabet starts on your body. It either starts at the tip of your heart, because in the lesson, we let them feel their hearts, okay? And it's in the middle, but it's slightly tilted to the left, okay? The point is to the left. So they can feel their heart. And then most letters of the alphabet actually starts on the tip of their heart. So every letter in the whole wide world starts on me. So what happens? They establish a relationship with the letters. So if you do the letter R, it will be starting on you, and then you go to the left. Why? Because all letters in the whole wide world starts on me. And the letters are positioned either between the head and where the neck and the body joins, or the neck and where the legs start, or the third section is legs to floor. So all the letters, think about it. Where would you start the letter ooh? Well, on my head. It's a tall letter. And then where do I stop? Where my leg starts. Okay, so that's right on me. And part of the program is we teach them all the letters that are shaped to the left first, then all the letters that are shaped on me second, and lastly, all the letters that are shaped to the right of, you got it, me. Because that way it enables them to have a very strong map for letters in terms of their own body. And then when they move to paper, ach man, easy peasy.
Speaking of your GPS and your journey being starting with you, I think that is applicable throughout life. I think sometimes people forget that. They sort of want to compartmentalize information and skills for the earlier years and then forget them when problems arise later on. But I think if you always come back to me, that will help a lot. Yes,
it does, Marinda. If I can just continue there, it's the same with an older child that is battling, maybe to tell the D and the B apart, or who may even be diagnosed and very often misdiagnosed as dyslexic. Okay, because amen. Then they turn this way, then they turn that way. I think what is incredibly important is to remember the direction of your feet, which direction your toes are pointing determines the direction of letters. This is incredibly important, because if I'm facing you and my toes are facing you as well, for me, well, for your eyes, the letter B, I think, well, I'm doing it in reverse at the moment. So it will face this way. But if I turn my body this way, the letter B will be facing that way. So please do this. Please do this when you've got some time, is turn your body and see how the direction of the letters change. So if the child doesn't have a fixed frame of reference, a fixed point of departure, current location, being very aware of their feet planted firmly on the ground, it's close to impossible for some children to learn to acquire the alphabet. And this is very, very interesting because we found through our research with the Russian neurologist and their research with astronauts, well, they call them cosmonauts, is the incredible importance of the feet being firmly planted on the ground, because there are gravitational receptors under your feet. I don't want to go too technical now, but there are receptors under your feet that it works like gravity works like a magnet. And there's receptors under your feet. That's why it's so wonderful with homeschool children that they can be barefoot all the time, barefooted. So those receptors under the feet actually helps the vestibular system in the ears and in the neck to direct the child. In our research, we have found that very often children are misdiagnosed with ADHD, misdiagnosed even as autistic sometimes, misdiagnosed as dyslexic, when actually it's a faulty process in the body that can be rectified. I do not dispute that there are children who, and adults who suffer from a condition called dyslexia. I do not dispute that. But I think there are many people walking out there thinking, and children as well, they can't when they can. They just need a couple of steps in between.
I presume in our next interview, we're going to discuss that, which is going to be very exciting. I can't wait. The content of the lessons in the manual is well structured and has a good flow. Every lesson builds on the previous one and reinforces what was covered before. Why is it important to do that?
Well, we as humans are part of nature. And if you watch nature, we're moving from winter to spring. These sequences in breathing, you exhale and you inhale, or you inhale and you exhale. These rhythms, these constant rhythms. And in these rhythms, if you look at a baby, the milestones, the one follows onto the other. Why? They call it scaffolding. So we always work from the most simple to the most complex, continuously building on the previous skill. That's what makes learning magnificent. But it's if we approach learning in silos, you know, each thing is an activity on its own. Learning is not a series of activities. Learning is not that. Learning is the ability to adapt and really dive in to understand myself, my environment, and the people in the environment, the objects and things and processes in your environment as well. Because then you can operate in your environment with confidence. And that is the start of learning.
What are the kinds of skills that parents will master with their children when working through the program? And why is it important in terms of reading readiness?
So these are whole series. And we've had a picture drawn. I love pictures because pictures just, you know, it's 1,000 words. And between, it's a river with, there's a raging river. And on each side, obviously, there are children. On the left are the preschool children, still learning in a playful manner. Okay? On the right, there are reading children. But there's this raging river in between that a parent and a child needs to cross. And those embedded in this program, the first one are those skills that need to develop. And we call them, it's like stepping stones. So stepping stones to take you safely from the world of play to the world of reading. So it's body awareness, current location. It is awareness of laterality. It's awareness of its movement, because when you move, you instinctively cross the midline. When you instinctively cross the midline, well, you can only do that through movement. You build muscle tone. And with muscle tone, you develop a sense of direction and a sense of sequence and a sense of rhythm. And all of these are fundamental skills that a child needs before they can read. And then obviously, auditory perception, visual perception. What does it mean? Making sense of what I hear, making sense, auditory perception, making sense of what I see, visual perception. And none of this can happen without the context of the language of learning. And maybe if I may just say something about the language of learning, sometimes we teach our children in a second language, and then we continuously translate. It's not the way the brain learns. If we want to teach a child in mother tongue, that's very easy because it's a natural flow. You want to teach your child in a second language, it's incredibly important that and it's actually wonderful for the relationship, whether your home language, language of your heart, is your mother tongue, but the language of learning is the other language. In South Africa, it's very often English. So the moment we go into school mode, we go into a different language, because as long as you translate, well, the brain is a lazy thing. As long as you translate, the brain will, the child, it's actually not the child, it's the way the brain works. It says, hang on, she's going to repeat it in the other language just now. I don't have to learn this. You understand? So if they submerge in a language, they acquire a language fluently. And then in the brain, there are different files for different languages. Marinda, you know, while you were involved with BabyGym, how much research we've done with babies. Despite a lot of theory that says you do not introduce a second language before the age of 9. But from the moment, our basis is neuroscience. And in neuroscience, we know the sounds that a child, a baby, is not exposed to before their first year, they become desensitized to that. And that's where accent comes from. So you can clearly hear, my moedertaal is Afrikaans. So I can't get beyond that because unfortunately, I learned English way later in my life. So I speak English with my Afrikaans sound system. And that's where the accent comes from. But if you expose a baby from the moment they're born to different languages, but it must be consistent. You know, in a multicultural country like ours, say mom and dad speaks different languages. It's marvelous. Dad consistently speak your language with the child. Mom speak your language. And if there's a caregiver who speaks a third language, go girl. That's wonderful. That baby will be able to acquire 3 languages like a mother tongue speaker if people consistently only speak 1 language. If on the other hand, there's a mother tongue language that you communicate with at home, and there's a language of learning, the brain immediately separates those. So one of the important skills in this reading readiness program is to develop vocabulary. Not just vocabulary, but meaning and understanding. They really need to be very proficient communicators, listeners, understanders, and speakers of a language before you can ever consider teaching them to read.
I remember you always sharing that story with us about Cosette, how at home you would speak Afrikaans, and as you walked through the school gate, she would switch over to English. It always stuck with me.
Me too.
That's a perfect example. Then, you might have answered part of this question, but the Reading Readiness program seems to follow a process, like we said, and you give very specific guidance in each lesson as to what parents can possibly predict their children to answer. Why is this important?
I didn't try and predict. Very interesting that that's how it came about. But maybe I did. I've just never thought of that. Marinda, you're very, very thought-provoking. Thank you for your questions. You see, it was written, the lesson plans are written as a conversation between you and your child. Okay? Because you want to elicit, you want to communicate. You know, it's a weird thing, especially in traditional school. They want children to sit still and be quiet and just absorb and regurgitate. Okay, that's not learning. That's memory. That's not learning. And in this world that we live in, our children need to be able to think critically and analytically. And for that reason, They need to learn to think before they go to grade 1. They need to be very proficient thinkers. And for that reason, the lessons are structured. There's an intro, there's always a context, there's a theme, there's a context. And then we discuss things like that. And what does the child already know about that? Draw out, because that's what education means. It's not to stamp in, it's to draw out. Draw out what do they know already, because we are framing. I'm devious. In that introductory part of the lesson, I framed, I made sure that there's certain language. I structure the questions in such a way that it will lead to specific language, because I need them to say certain words or learn a specific rhyme or sing a specific song, because that's an introduction to the sound that we're going to learn that day. And one thing I must make very, very clear, I do not understand why so many people follow a phonics approach to a non-phonetic language such as English. We need to know the names of the letters, but we can't use phonics per se, because then we lie to children, because there is no such thing in English as one letter, one sound. It depends. Think of the A in baby. Listen, what is the A, the baby, the A in baby, what does it sound like? What does it sound like in zebra? It's not the same. And in ant, and so I can go on. So it's incredibly important in our lessons that we have, we set them up to speak, to say certain words, which we always reinforce with yes, because that's how we build self-esteem. Embedded in this whole program is building the child's self-esteem and their relationship with the letters of the alphabet. They become their friends, because then there's no fear. Because who's important? I am the most important person in the whole wide world if I'm a preschool child or foundation phase child. And when they learn the letters of the alphabet in that way, they just remember it so much better. So when we lead, we always lead with words, and we listen to what are the sounds that all these words have in common. So it's ground and gravity and green, and so we go on. But it's not just random words. There was an experience first, and that's why the structure of the lesson is so important. And then when we say, I wonder how does one write the G in green and ground and gravity? You hear? It's what does the sound look like? Because sound comes first. As human beings, we spoke for many years before we started writing, okay? You have to write before you can read. You have to write, somebody had to write before we can read. So always verbal to writing to reading. Sorry for deviating from your question.
No, but Melodie, I wouldn't say you were devious. I think you were brilliant. Most certainly. Now, it's such a beautiful program with 33 beautiful lessons. And I wonder how parents can gain access to this program. And is there any other information you would like to add about it?
You see, there's 33 lessons in the English Reading Readiness program. There's only 30 in die Afrikaanse leesgereedmakingsprogram. Why? Well, you know, and there are no capital letters. Because as the brain works, you need to give them the brain the basics, and then you elaborate in time. So the 30 in Afrikaans excluded the C, excluded the F, excluded the Q, excluded the X and the Z. Okay, in English, included the C, included the F, included the Q. Why? Because they're commonly used in English. Okay, so where can you find them? Mind e-learning at Mind Moves. There's a wonderful online store where you can just go and read. There's wonderful articles on the Mind Moves website. That's www.mindmoves.co.za. wonderful free articles. And in the bookshop on the Mind Moves website, you can read free chapters to some of the books that I've written. But in terms of the reading readiness, die leesgereedmakingsprogram, there's an online training course that includes, I can't remember how many videos, loads, but they're short, man, because we teach you a principle, give you time to consolidate that, scaffolding, and then we build on to that. And the program comes with a manual, a comprehensive manual. It comes with a workbook for the learner and loads of posters. So everything you need. The only thing that's not included is a beanbag. I'm sure you've got a beanbag.
Most of the homeschool families, I'm sure, will have beanbags. Definitely. Otherwise, they'll make a plan. They know how to make a plan.
Yeah.
Melodie, it's been lovely having you here today. We've really learned so much, and I'm sure the parents have got a total new insight into what reading readiness actually is. And you've given them a lot to think about. So we really look forward to our next session with you, which will focus on your neurodynamics intervention program. Thank you for your time, and we can't wait to see you again soon.
Thank you, Marinda. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to connect to a whole new audience. Thank you. And thank you for dedicating your life to the development of your own children. I salute you.